Dear fellow musicians, my name is Henning Kraggerud. I'm a violinist, viola player, composer and improvisator. And I have students here at the Academy of Music in Oslo. And one of my big goals is to start a creative revolution where people can express everything which is important for them, open doors to new possibilities of ways to be musicians. And it is incredibly easy to become a composer. Most people don't believe that, but during 2 weeks, by improvising 5 minutes a day, everybody can achieve that. So, where do we start? Well, start with what you already have. A cell phone where you can record yourself and keep a little diary of your creative process. Maybe play 3 to 5 minutes a day without any plan. Listen to it after 2 weeks. Write down whatever you thought was maybe that's an okay idea, and then you're a composer. It is as easy as that. When I decided that I wanted to really make recordings and videos with good enough quality, with such small equipment that I could have it in my violin case at all times, I approached sound engineers and they said, you can just forget about it. I'm glad I didn't listen to them because I have now recording equipment which are so tiny and give so good quality that I can bring it with me everywhere. And it's not about getting perfect CD quality, it's getting something you emotionally connect with which sounds good enough. And that is achievable without paying much money or without lugging around with heavy, difficult to use equipment. And these days, cell phones, of course, can also be modified and used to a great extent. So my goal is to help the students and my colleagues to take the first steps when you are hindered by your own doubt and think, oh, I cannot do that, until you get to this, oh, this is good enough, it sounds good. And then, of course, some people get addicted and want it even better, fine, but you can already use it. It doesn't sound bad. And I will tell a little bit about my own story, because I used to be a composer from I was 8 to around 20, but then I was caught up with my career as a soloist, and it was thanks to new technological devices that I were able in my 30s to start up again my creative career. So now, these days, everybody walks around with a cell phone in their pocket, and that goes for my students and for me and virtually everybody I meet. And this can be used as a diary. So if you want to start to do improvisations or composing, you can start on day one without buying any new device at all. And this is indeed what I do with my students. Most of my students are now very, very happy to improvise during lessons, to make their own cadenzas, to compose. And the key element I have found is to get good enough quality, but it needs to be instant and very, very easy for students who have no knowledge about recording also. So at every lesson, when I improvise together with my student, I will record on my cell phone a rather low size file, not like the best quality, but good enough. So during lesson, I can just email it directly to the student, and they then start to do the same. And if they are satisfied with the improvisation, they will email it to me. And because I use low size files, I have it with cell phone every improvisations I've done alone and with my students for the last 3 years, and it's still not taking up particularly much space. It's not about, is it 50 megapixel camera or anything like that. So you can see on Instagram and other places, it's the mood of the picture. It needs to be communicating the feelings you want to express. Yeah. And the same it is with recordings. So I have various devices where you can very quickly change that mood also. So if your students have done an improvisation which is particularly nice and they want it to sound very good. I don't know if you can see my camera here, but a little equalizer here, a little bit more bass, a little bit more less treble or mid-tones. And I can even add a little bit of reverb if the recording is too dry, and suddenly it sounds like a good CD recording, or something they are used to from Spotify.
Exactly.
Of course, if you sit with studio monitors and really listen, you can discern this is not the same quality. But I think as for like Instagram, how people react to it when they hear, 99% 9 people think, oh, this sounds nice. Well, this is a very good question. So I think here at the Academy, of course, we have a professional part who do really high quality sound recording and edit and do all of this. And this is, of course, very important to use in an orchestra project to record full orchestra and get the balance good. But what I do here is really how can we get every musician to use recording and reach the quality where I think this is actually good enough. At this point, it is about the content and not about the technical quality. And recording something like violin and piano can be done really quite simple. So even when you have only one microphone, mono, I teach the students to place it closer to the violin or viola than to the piano. And this you can actually also just test very quickly. And then they learn how a good enough balance sounds, and they can achieve the same themselves. So it's not rocket science if you compare with how incredibly much time we use for practice. Let's say 3 to 5 hours for decades. My view is that if you talk about this 1 hour and then 2 weeks later 1 more hour when they have some questions, and you quickly go from I know nothing about recording to I can achieve something I'm proud of. We live in a world where we think that specialists knows best within their own fields, but I'm going the other directions. I go back to how the music life used to be. And my finding is that before starting to do improvisation regularly, many people think very differently about it. But again, this doorstep mile, once you get people to try it out for a little while, it is actually very pleasant to do whatever you like at any moment without having to follow a very difficult and strict plan. So you can move fast or slow just by what do I feel like. And it's very addictive. So I get people addicted to the pleasures of being creative through improvisation. But of course, this recording thing can also be used for regular sort of different style of practice. So I think once you start to understand a little bit about the recording, also about sound quality, because when people play, say, Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto and record themselves on the cell phone, and they don't realize that it's optimized for speech intelligence, they will listen and think, oh, this sounds terrible. But when they send this same recording to me and I put it through an equalizer, they think, oh, I made that good. And that means that when they have been comparing themselves to some Spotify international artist, they have been comparing themselves too cruelly. They have been comparing as if that Spotify was also done just by recording directly to a cell phone. And this also brings confidence to the playing, that they can listen back to themselves and think, oh, I'm actually quite a bit better than my nightmares. Because far too many people buy expensive equipment to use it once or twice because they're intimidated and then they never do it again. So I think the gradual build-up, both for teachers and for students, starts with what you have, experiment until it gets decent. One of the most important things is actually to break habits. So if you manage to have a setup where you practice, which is so easy that you can just take up your instrument, press record, and you can go straight away, that will lead to that you can use it very often. there is nothing to set up or to fuss about technological. So once you have solved these problems and you have a setup, this is also so freeing for the imagination. So I think too complicated setup and that you use 2 hours to put everything in place, of course, that would prevent this type of use.